Hey guys, how's it going? Matt Lighty here, and we're discussing today my CoC burning Vortex CI Trickster in Hardcore Breach League. I know it's a mouthful, but all these words do have meaning, so let's go over them one by one. You have CoC, which is an acronym for Cast On Crit. This is revolving around the Cast On and Critical Strike trigger gem, which essentially means when you were to crit with an attack skill, 100% chance to cast the linked socketed gems along with it. And now this has an internal cooldown, so it only casts about 3 to 4 times a second, but it's perfect for this build that only revolves around one large spell being cast. Which brings us to the next word, Vortex. Now, Vortex is a cold spell, but the reason the build's called Burning is we do something a little funky with it, so we'll discuss that later on. We play Trickster to utilize high attack speed, movement speed, flat ES from Shade Form, and the free movement skill, which allows us to shield charge, which is what we use to proc our cast on crit. Now, we want to go back to the burning for a second here. The main unique for the build that revolves and makes it burning is we're using Pyre Ring. Now, Pyre converts 100% of our cold damage into fire damage. Now this in conjunction with Elemental Equilibrium Keystone, which says every time we hit with an element, it makes the res of the enemy we hit higher of that element and lower to the other elements. So if I hit them with fire damage, they gain fire res and they lose a bunch of cold and lightning res. Okay, so the same thing if I hit them with lightning damage, they would lose a bunch of cold and fire res. Okay, so because of this and because the way Vortex works, we shield charge into the enemy, it procs cast on crit. Vortex triggers, which does fire damage because of Pyre, but here's the kicker. The after burn, or the degen on the ground, doesn't come from me, it comes from the Vortex, so it's not affected by Pyre, which means it's still cold damage. So now after the initial hit, which was all fire, which means it can proc ignite because it's a crit, because crits apply status effects of elemental damage, so fire is ignite. We then apply the burn. Then the Elemental Equilibrium triggers, meaning they gain a bunch of fire res and lose all their cold and lightning res. Then the dot in the ground that's all cold damage does a lot more damage because of the Elemental Equilibrium. Now on top of this is some additional interactions. Because we run Herald of Lightning, every time Herald of Lightning is to proc, because our initial hit is lightning damage, it means when we do hit things they do shock, it will hit things before we actually shield charge into them. It means they then lose all their fire res and all their cold res, and they gain a bunch of lightning res, which is fine. So when we then initial hit them again, it's doing the extra more damage on the initial fire hit. So it's a build that has a lot of synergy going on in general, but it has some pitfalls. Now I played this build as a test build in League because I thought it'd be a good idea. I knew it was fairly cheap going in. You don't need a 6-link Vol's Protector because it's not discharge. You don't need Vol's Devotion. You don't need Cost Breeze even. Cost Breeze will make it better, but it also complicates the build in a lot of ways. So because of this, all you require is a Vegan Dagger, essentially a 5-link, and you want to utilize some sort of CI stun immunity because your Chaos Inoculation, which means you have extremely high ES and a 1 life, you're prone to being stunned because stun is calculated on your maximum life, which is 1, so you get stunned pretty much every hit. So you can either run Eye of Chiyula, you could run Valerium Ring, you could run Kiara's Determination Flask if you want to work on that uptime. It's a bit of a chore to keep flasks up when you're not a build that has oriented around flasks, or you could run Skyforth if you can afford them. Now, the reason we wanted to go CI instead of Life is because obviously we get the massive ES from Shade Form. Also, minimal investment in Tree is where CI really shines. We're using a Shield and Dagger, so you give a ton of ES from Shield, a ton of ES from Chest, and from Helm. Rainbow Strides work great as a boot. Your belt you can focus on ES and res, and other pieces you can focus on res as well. Pyre actually offers a nice amount of res, which is pretty convenient. Another minor interaction with Pyre, which is actually super strong, is it destroys bodies on death. So this means stuff like Necrovigil, they get instantly destroyed, and also prevents corpse reanimation or prevents detonate dead. These are all quite little quality of life things, but they actually add up in hardcore to make a really safer hardcore experience. But overall, the build has a few pitfalls, namely, despite it being a caster and crit build, and despite me having Ghost Reef and Foul Pack, because my initial hit isn't super high and not hitting quite often, it's more of a degen based build, leech is a problem. So unless you're running basically Vingtars, you're just not going to be leeching enough. You can socket in the leech gem, and I tried Warlord's Mark, and I tried Azuri Flask. You simply don't leech enough. So at the moment, the playstyle has been I charge into a pack, essentially one-shot it, and move on. If it's any target that I don't one-shot, I can shield charge out and shield charge back in within a second and whittle the boss away. But my main defense for regen is basically walking in to wait until my ES comes back, which is no bueno. It's really not viable in that sense. But overall, the build functions great. This build is not the best build, but it is great for what it does. But as far as conversion from CoC builds, great. Perfectly works fine. It was a good experience, and I enjoyed it very much. So let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys next time. Lighty out.